There is a very strong feeling in a lot of traditional Japanese art of the part as a kind of evocation of the whole. You might have a beautiful tea bowl, a blush of colour on the surface that reminds you of a particular fruit or a flower in bloom. The way the lip sort of roves around might remind you of the landscape beyond that. And the whole tea bowl itself might be a representation of the culture from which it emerged, maybe even Japan itself. It is a very strong feeling that you find in Japanese literature. It's a feeling that I get looking around at some of these extraordinary pots by Ken Matsuzaki. And given that this is his 8th show here at the Goldmark Gallery in nearly 20 years, given that he's enjoying a major retrospective at the same time at the Mashiko Museum of Ceramic Art, there is also a sense of the pots in this show as a kind of evocation of his whole career. As we look around the beautiful works in this show, I hope they'll show how Matsuzaki has never been happy to stay still. He's always moved his art forward. He's always looked for a new avenue to explore. I hope it'll show some of the traditions that he's drawing on, some of the other potters that maybe have inspired his work. But also to show the kind of strength of feeling, the character, the essence that is shared by all of his work and for which he is still very much celebrated to this day. It's worth just outlining a little of Ken Matsuzaki's ceramic lineage, because working in Mashiko, a town perhaps the most famous in Japan for its potting heritage, particularly of the last 100 years, there was a great amount of legacy that sort of rests on his shoulders. The most famous potter to have settled and worked in Mashiko, essentially establishing a kind of Mashiko style, was of course Shoji Hamada, who brought Mingei, a love of folk craft and art, a love of the anonymous works of anonymous craftsmen from Korean traditions, from Chinese traditions. Hamada was the most famous potter of the last 100 years. His pupil, Tatsuzo Shimaoka, then brought a completely different style to Mashiko itself, using inlaid rope patterns that he'd got from ancient Jomon pottery in Japan. Matsuzaki was then apprenticed for 5 years to Shimaoka. It was a strange apprenticeship, he said. Not an awful lot of direct tuition, but becoming an amateur masseur and helping to relieve some of the tension from Shimaoka's working day, he managed to glean many tips, techniques, but also greater philosophy of what being a potter really meant. When we look at the pots around this show, there are elements reminiscent of Hamada, of Shimaoka, but the voice is completely unique to Matsuzaki. The work shares a great deal more DNA with the Momoyama pots, the pots made at the turn of the 16th and 17th century, a kind of renaissance in Japanese pottery, where individuality, a kind of explosion of different forms and glazes occurred. And that is the period of work that Matsuzaki is looking to for a kind of sense of spirit. We look at this beautiful vase that's been decorated with Yohen, that's the expression of his kiln, the natural ash that has fallen in his wood-fired kiln and given this beautiful kind of veil of greys, goldeny colours, pooling to these little areas of sort of glassy glaze. This is a pot that has links to Shimaoka, for example, this wonderful texture that's been worked into the clay here. But the very heavy ashing on it, this wonderful kind of bulbous form, this is Matsuzaki at work. A key feature of Matsuzaki's career has been that he's never been happy to sit still, to simply rest on the legacy of these two great potters who came before him and to continue their style. Not only has he turned to his own inspirations in Momoyama pottery, but he's also forged his own kind of innovative ceramic traditions. Over my shoulder here are the tokaiseki vases, a development where rather than throwing these works on the wheel or hand building them using a coiling system, these involve taking whole lumps of clay and tearing, twisting, wire cutting them on the wheel to make these wonderful kind of natural, organic, expressive forms. You see them here in two colorways. The black, yugen, a word that suggests a kind of deep, profound meaning. It's a word that comes up in Zen Buddhist thought. And these hakuji, referring back to old white porcelain wares from Japanese ceramic history. Tokaiseki are just one of the kind of innovations that Matsuzaki has been making over the last number of years. And later in this walkthrough, we'll see one of the great things he's been searching for. He's been trialing and testing and has eventually found in this exhibition. Living and working in Mashiko, where you have both the reputation of Hamada there in the background, the legacy of Shimaoka, both of them living national treasures. Matsuzaki made a very conscious decision that he didn't want to make pastiches of these two potters' work, that he had to find his own way. And he found it in the extraordinary creative explosion of the Momoyama period. The works that we see around us, you could broadly categorize as Oribe pottery. These are different types of pottery, typically glazes, teawares, certain forms that thrived under the patronage and in the time of the warrior aesthete Furuta Oribe. Oribe was a pupil of the great tea ceremony revolutionary practitioner Sen no Rikyu. And from Rikyu, he helped sort of develop this particular quality of tea ceremony, very sort of rural, rustic, a sort of quite spare aesthetic. But when we look around the pots that are here on these shelves, we see a kind of burst of colour and of expression. Furuta Oribe was one of many warlords vying for his place in a time of great strife, great sort of violence as different people tried to unify Japan into a sort of single country. And so the Oribe tradition is really a kind of search for beauty, for kind of expressions of nature at a time of great violence. You see in these beautiful Oribe green glazes, this copper green glaze, kind of representations, reminders, memories of the natural world around us. You often see this glaze paired with quite dynamic iron brushwork. So you'll see decorating these boxes, these cups, bowls, vases, this kind of wonderful integration of decoration from the hand and also the natural colours of these glazes. Much of what Matsuzaki makes is hand-built, so you'll see on the shelves around this exhibition squared off rectangular vases. You'll see these wonderful twisting forms, these sort of forms with these strange kind of hierarchies of levels in them. They're pots that are sort of reminiscent almost of monuments or of stones that have been sort of left behind. They have this sort of ancient feeling to them, but they're very much innovations of his own. They're forms that he's come to through hand building. It would be very easy for a potter to look to these extraordinary pots made in the Momoyama period and simply repeat what had come before. But Matsuzaki, of course, is looking to find his own voice, to see how the Oribe traditions can be made relevant today. The big difference you'll see on the pots in this exhibition is the Yohen effect on his work. Yohen simply means kiln change. It's a word that describes the movement of flame and of natural ash through his noborigama, his multi-chambered kiln in Mashiko. It's a kiln that Matsuzaki actually had to rebuild after the earthquake in 2011 razed his first. So he's had to go through the whole process of getting to grips with how the kiln behaves, how to fire it, how to get over this protracted firing taking place over 8 days, I believe, to really get the most out of that sort of reducing atmosphere, to get this wonderful movement of ash across the surfaces of his pots. One of the reasons why Yohen is so important to Matsuzaki is that, as he describes it, it can take him into the sort of realm of impossible dreams. There are pots that he can work towards, that he can envision in his kiln, depending on where they're placed, depending on how he anticipates the fire and the ash is going to move around it during that firing. He has a pretty good idea of how the effects of that sort of atmosphere are going to affect the surface of the pot. But there is always a chance in this firing as long as that there will be some kind of happy accident from the kiln, or be ash falling in a particular way, melting into different colours in a particular way, that affect a pot and take it to somewhere where he had never envisioned it. One of the glazes you'll see around this exhibition is called Shino. It's a glaze that was traditionally made with just a little clay, local clay, and feldspar. It was this white glaze that was used particularly at the height of the Momoyama period. There are plenty of Shino works in this exhibition too, but they are completely transformed with the effects of Yohen, the change in the kiln. Over this beautiful kind of pillowy cloud white surface, these very thick Shino glazes that can slide and melt over one another, you have this extraordinary effect of the ash flowing, interacting with, changing the colour of this Shino. In very heavy reduction in the kiln, where there's lots of carbon, lots of smoke choking out the atmosphere, you get these sort of very dark, rich surfaces, this extraordinary collection of colours and textures. And it's this combination of glaze and of the firing that gives Matsuzaki's pots their unique characteristic. After this kind of flourishing of ceramic arts in the Momoyama period, the secrets of Shino glazing were lost for several hundred years. It was down to the discoveries of a couple of specific potters in the early 20th century that led to its revival. Shino glaze is typically white, but depending on how it is fired, depending on the glaze, depending on the clay that's beneath it, perhaps a slip that's beneath it, it can be drawn out to these darker, richer, kind of bodily colours, these beautiful reds, oranges, pinks. You can even, if you really know what you're doing, achieve this extraordinary purple colour. And this is something that Matsuzaki has been chasing for many, many years now. The colour of these tea bowls he calls Murasaki, and there is a long history to this word. Murasaki simply translates as purple. It's the name of a plant from which the purple dye that was used to colour kimonos has been used for many hundreds, if not thousands of years in Japan. It's crushed and cloths are bathed in its sort of colour dyes in these great baths. It's also the name that was taken by Lady Murasaki, lady in waiting, who was also the author of the Tale of Genji, one of the foundational works in Japanese literature. And so this colour Murasaki has this kind of sense of ripeness, of maturity, this golden age of the long courtly era of Japan's history some 1,000 years ago. One of the many potters who revived Momoyama period pottery, who revived Shino ware in particular, was Tokuro Kato. And he innovated this extraordinary purple colour with a series of tea bowls in the late 1970s, I believe. They were called Murasaki Nioi, the scent of purple. And when they were first shown, they caused something of a scandal. The critics were completely divided on whether this work was wonderful, kind of glam, expressive, kind of individual expression of art, whether it was sort of tasteless, charmless, unrefined. Matsuzaki has been looking to these pots by Tokuro Kato and looking to achieve his own purple ware, and he's finally done it. It's not an easy colour to achieve in a pot. To get this darkening of the Shino surface, the pot has to be fired in a very reduced atmosphere over a long period of time. That reduction draws iron out of the clay towards the surface, and it darkens this typically white Shino surface into this sort of deep purple colour that's reminiscent almost of a sort of a ripe plum maybe. To achieve this, Matsuzaki has to very gradually lower the temperature of his kiln while he keeps this reduction going. And he struggled to work out how to do that. He decided at one point that he would add bags and bags of charcoal. He would try and sort of choke the kiln out with charcoal to keep this reduction going. What he found as he trialled this purple Shino was that these bags of charcoal would instead surge the temperature in the kiln, and it would cause this metallic effect in his Shino glazes. And if I show you this extraordinary vase, you might be able to see the kind of sheen bouncing off its surface, this wonderful golden effect, something that he hadn't anticipated at all. Another happy accident of Yohen. After many years of searching for it, after investigating, experimenting, discovering this wonderful metallic effect that he could achieve, it's been yet more time that Matsuzaki has spent trying to achieve this perfect purple that he's been after. And finally, here it is in this exhibition. Just like that sense I described at the start of this walkthrough of the part evoking this sort of grander whole, there's a feeling in this very sort of rich purple, this mature purple, this feeling of a kind of ripe fruit, of changing seasons, of the movement from autumn through winter into spring again, this passing of time which is always evoked in Matsuzaki's pots as it is in traditional Japanese literature and art. This feeling of a sense of place in the natural world around you, and of the changes in that world and the colours, the textures, the moods that come with that as being a fundamental part of our life here on this planet. It's something that's suffused in all his work, and I think what makes it so special to return to time and again and to enjoy it for these wonderful kind of changes in atmosphere across the surface of his pots. As I prepared for this walkthrough, looking back over the many interviews, the articles, the exhibitions we've had in this long relationship with Ken Matsuzaki, I was struck by one moment. We were interviewing him a few years ago about another exhibition, and he described how when he commissioned the garden that surrounds his workshop, not far from that of Shoji Hamada and Tatsuzo Shimaoka, he gave his gardener a simple image. He said, I just want the natural feeling of the mountains and the trees that you would find out on its slopes. He in fact gave him just 2 lines. All I want is the colours of the fresh green buds of spring and the autumn leaves. And I was struck by that image because it's something that sounds quite familiar, quite similar in fact to Zen Buddhist poetry, the poetry of the era of Lady Murasaki. It's this feeling of great profundity and meaning that can only be expressed through looking out to the changing seasons, the changing world around us. And when we look at these pots in this exhibition, we get just that. We get the autumn leaves, this wonderful change of colours as things move on and decay. We get the fresh green of new buds. We get this sense of growth, of things coming to fruition and maturity. We get life and death, essentially. It's been a great privilege to show Matsuzaki's work. I think these pots come alive with the beautiful ikebana displays that have been put on by Ria Day for us. And I think they connect us to this natural world that Matsuzaki is drawing on, that he's taking inspiration from and re-expressing himself in these beautiful, beautiful pots. The work you see here is, of course, for sale. You'll find them on our website. If you can make it to this exhibition, do please come. These pots give so much in texture and in colour. To experience them in the flesh is really quite wonderful. For now, I'll leave you with this extraordinary 8th exhibition of pots by Ken Matsuzaki.